Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wisdom Chat. And my guest today is a wonderful chap called Tony Redondo. He's the founder of Cosmos Currency Exchange. Tony, so lovely to have you with us today, and thank you so much for giving of your time. Would you like just to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me on, Phil. So, yeah, Tony Redondo. I'm founder director of Cosmos Currency Exchange. Basically, my whole working life has been in financial services. So I go back to prehistoric days of 1985, and which is a salient point, Phil, because it means that for the first sort of 15 years of my career, um, I was involved in the City of London in merchant banking, pre-computers and pre-internet.
Well, yeah. And we can remember those days well, can't we, Tony?
Absolutely, we certainly can. We certainly can. Whereas if you speak to a youngster these days, it's like, no, there's such a life ever exist.
It's we since those days, though, if you think about it, we've come an awful long way, haven't we? And with the development of technology and the speed of change, I mean, I was just reading a moment ago about a piece that you had written about Cosmos, and what grabbed my attention was the currency exchange rates changing every 3 seconds, night and day, equating to something like 28.8 thousand changes every 3 seconds, and we can sort of increase those numbers even further. That's phenomenal in terms of the rate of change. But what else grabbed my attention was the fact that despite the rate of change, one of the things you don't want to let go of is the old school of relating to your clients, that personal service. And that really kind of warmed my heart, really, because we have been, over the last 2 years, through a difficult time where we spent a lot of time isolating and separating, disconnected from one another. And we've had to rely very heavily on technology, but we've lost something of that personal touch. I mean, how has it been for you, Tony, with regards to the work in the currency exchange market and trying to maintain that old school connection?
Sure. I mean, I think after all this time in the markets, and I've just completed my 36th year in the financial markets, I guess it's become old habit, but it really doesn't stem anything else other than for the first 15 or so years of my career in the City of London, it was pre-computers, pre-internet, and the only way to do business was the way business had been done for the previous 400 years, going all the way back to the original coffee houses in the City of London. And that's meeting people face to face and going to their premises, going to a client's premises, the client's coming into you, and discussing whatever needed to be discussed. There might be the odd paper form to fill in, and you shook hands and got on with it. And that was the only way business was done. So that's the environment that I grew up in. And then computers started coming in, and then the internet started coming in. And then between 2000 and 2020, the various brokers and banks I worked for in those 20 years, Phil, I was always one of the oldest, if not the oldest, trader on the trading floor. And it was really interesting because anybody sort of under the age of sort of 30, 35, and trading tends to be a young man's game more often than not. So, you get a young bucks who want to be the next Wolf of Wall Street types. There's a lot of those in the industry, for good and for worse. And they don't know anything else other than the internet. So to them, chat boxes, artificial intelligence, press 1 for this, press 2 for that is just the way they've always done things. They don't know anything else. Whereas for somebody like myself and for you, we know a life beforehand, so we're kind of like comfortable with both ideas. We like the idea of what the technology does, but I think we've got a different attitude to it. Certainly, in plain language, we don't treat the technology as a god, we treat it as a tool to be used.
Yeah, yeah, and that's it. That's a great point, is that because uh, when we think about, certainly in the present moment, the rate of change that's going on. We were talking about um, you know, the interest rate changing. The Bank of England's
Mm,
announcement with regards to the increase in the interest rate, the what the Americans are doing,
mm,
and also what's going on in terms of what Brexit has brought about, but also the conflict in the Ukraine. There's so many things happening, and when you
yeah.
add that together with the rate of activities going on now
Mm,
because of technology, that is phenomenal. But for some of our listeners who perhaps do trade abroad or have investments abroad, like properties, or actually sending money, for some who are in this country but sending money back home,
yes.
this is a very challenging and concerning time, really. I would imagine. I mean, what sort of things would you want to say to those people with regards to what's happening on the currency markets?
The situation for clients in financial services, and especially dealing in foreign exchange, Phil, is not made easy because 99% of the market is online technology based answers only. And however clever the algorithm, you can't discuss anything with the algorithm. All you can do is ask a question.
Yeah,
There are four types of providers of foreign exchange in the market, Phil. There's the banks, which are purely reactive. You ask them a question, they give you the quote, you take it or leave it. It's as simple as that. It doesn't go beyond that these days. The
yeah,
days of bank managers like we used to know are long gone.
yeah,
Um, there's the online apps where, again, you log into the app, you go through security, you ask for a quote, you get it, you accept it or you don't.
yeah,
The third option is there are so-called hybrid brokers out there who are technology led, but also employ human beings.
mm,
But the problem is that, like all these things, the devil's in the detail. When you look in the detail, when you scratch underneath the surface, what you realize is the people that are employed by those brokers are not currency experts, they're not bankers, they're salespeople reading off a script. And the problem with that is we both know that every human being's circumstances and attitudes is completely unique to them.
yeah,
So it's almost guaranteed that they're going to ask a question that's not on the script, which sometimes
yeah,
leads to problems.
yeah,
So,
certainly does.
and working in that environment for those number of years, I never came across a client who said to me, "I don't want to talk to you. I'd rather self-service, on the platform." If they were given a choice of dealing with another human being, they always took it. And
Yeah,
so that kind of like resonated with me all the time. And then the market went to a point where there was hardly anybody left who knew about life before computers and the internet and was comfortable. And then it was a very simple thing. I was still employed. It was the works Christmas party in 2019. We were in a pub. It was early December. It's a group of about, I don't know, 16, 18 of us, however many there were. And there were two tables next to us. There was a really rowdy table of people of our age who were talking and laughing and joking. And then behind us, there was this huge long table of youngsters who was deathly quiet. And the reason it was deathly quiet is because they were youngsters, even though they were sitting around a table from one another, they were texting each other rather than talking.
I've seen that. Do you know? I've had somebody in when I worked for an organisation in my former life. There was somebody who sent me an email asking a question, and I happened to be walking past their desk, and I said, "But the answer to your question is X," and they said, "Could you put it in an email for me?" And I said, "No, write it down." But yeah, you're right. I often see that myself. People sort of,
Yeah.
texting away, and you're thinking, um, who are they actually talking to? And
Yeah.
yeah, it does sound a bit quiet, doesn't it?
It's just incredible, and that really stuck with me. I kind of like laughed about it at the time,
Yeah,
but then
yeah,
driving home afterwards, I started thinking, you know, I've never known a human being, and most people that use foreign exchange tend to be from their sort of 30s upwards.
yeah,
Either because that's the age where you're kind of like settling down, you might be coming into some money, it might be your second, you've done your university, you've done your traveling, you've done your, sowing your wild oats or whatever the expression is, and you're settling down. And that's when people are coming into money. And the thing with foreign exchange as a provider, Phil, is that it's much more wide ranging than most people think it is. It's not all about multi-million pound deals. It can be,
yeah,
and often is, but it
yeah,
can also, most of my trading for clients in December is sending Christmas money abroad to
yeah,
family members. Because when you're sending £500 down to, a grandchild in Australia, if you go through the banks or a Western Union or an app, they're gonna take 4, 6, 8% off you,
hmm,
which is ridiculous because the process is exactly the same regardless of the amount.
yeah.
So by keeping it tight means that the grandchild gets a lot more Australian dollars for the same amount of sterling
That's a
coming
really
from
good
somebody like
point.
ourselves.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good point, is that, Tony? Because often we've got that saying, you don't know what you don't know,
Yeah,
and until somebody tells you these facilities are available where you can avoid pitfalls like that, then you tend to sort of fall into those same things unless you've been able to find or know where to find this information that
absolutely.
allows you to retain or ensure the recipient retains the bulk of what is actually sent to them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah,
And then it's knowing about having a lot of technical knowledge about the banking system. So, for example, you mentioned Brexit earlier, Phil.
yeah,
Um, the global payment system, which has been in the news for once because Russia has been excluded from it, it's called SWIFT.
yeah,
And that's how the majority of currency transfers get done. That's the mechanism, the delivery mechanism to send the euros to Spain or to Italy or wherever they happen to be going. And bear in mind, we're talking about a huge industry. First of all, it's the only financial industry that's open 24/7. The
right,
stock market's not, the commodity markets are not, the foreign exchange market is.
hmm,
And just to give you some perspective, on an average daily basis, the foreign exchange market turns over, I kid you not, $6.6 trillion a day. So
you've yeah,
it's huge amount of transactions.
yeah,
But one of the things that I noticed straight away come the 1st of February 2021, the day after we officially left the European Union and Brexit was
yeah,
done,
yeah,
is that um, I did a trade on that 1st of February to a lady client of mine that I've known for years. She runs a rescue dog center in Spain.
okay,
And occasionally she has investments in the UK, so she periodically sends money out there to keep the charity afloat, if you like, in Spain, and all the great work she does rescuing stray dogs and things. And then she phoned me up, and I have always said to clients, I like things to keep things simple. I like things very transparent. It's like the old advert, it says it on a tin. So
yeah,
when I quote you a rate, it's all inclusive. There's no, oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that fee and that charge and that cost. There's none of that nonsense. It is what it is. And that's how I like things done, because that's the way I like to be treated. And she phoned me up and said, oh, you've started charging transfer fees. And I said, no. What do you say? Oh, because I never received 10,000 euros. I received 9,962 or whatever it was. And I
yeah,
said, well, that's very strange. So I went back to my banking team. We got a proof of payment. It showed that we sent out £10,000. And then I asked them to send an urgent SWIFT message to the Spanish bank inquiring. And the message came back a few days later to say, oh, post-Brexit, because you've sent it via a global payment system, we're going to start charging lending fees because the UK is now outside of the European Union.
oh right,
So I went back to the client and I said, look, I'll reimburse you because it's not my issue. I haven't taken the money, but the deal is that I'll buy you 10,000, deliver 10,000 euros, and I haven't. So I'll cover the 42 euros or whatever the amount was.
Yeah.
But I've got a new solution for you because the European Union has its own payment system, which is called SEPA,
Right.
SCPA. And if you use that, then there are no landing fees, there are no receiving fees.
Yeah.
So it's having that local knowledge that only comes from experience to know
Yes.
that if you are sending monies to a client from the UK to the European Union, don't use SWIFT, use SEPA, because then the client gets the full amount and the bank doesn't take a delivery charge.
That's a really interesting point, and it takes you back as well to why that personal service and that human interaction is so vitally important in your work. I've got a past experience. It just came to mind. I worked for a company many years ago that looked at importing products a year in advance. So they would be looking at things like designs. This particular product was interior landscaping, and Christmas time is one of those times where there's an awful lot that happens in terms of Christmas decorations, from Christmas trees and all the baubles and everything. And people perhaps don't realise that these things are actually designed well over a year before they come out on the market. So what they do is these things were at the time being designed over in places like China, in Hong Kong, in Kowloon, in part of Hong Kong, and factories over there. And you would go over, visit, discuss the designs, agree the designs, and then it was down to, so how much is it going to cost? And you would agree the cost based on an exchange rate of that time. But what you had to do was then anticipate a year hence what might the interest rate or the exchange rate, be at that point in time. And I used to sit and listen to my managing director, who was the one who often would go and make these or have these discussions, and he really had to be on the ball in terms of what he thought would be the exchange rate at that time, so that the organisation itself that we worked for didn't lose out.
Absolutely.
But that is a challenging thing, because what you've just described there in terms of that particular client was a more immediate matter. And immediate changes, in this case coming out of Brexit, and what impact that had on them now charging fees through SWIFT, and then discovering that you could use SEPA to actually reduce the costs. But how would you deal with that with something so long term? And some people are going to be thinking, okay, I've got a property over abroad, it's longer term. I've got to kind of anticipate the cost of perhaps developing that, bring it up to spec, for those that do that, or holidays abroad or whatever. What kind of things would you say to those people, and how would they manage it?
Again, from my banking days, back in prehistoric computers and internet age, one of the instruments that we used a lot, and it's still available now, but you have to know about it, and it's not generally available on these apps. And most branch-based bankers don't even know it exists, but it does exist still. They're called forward contracts, Phil. And with a forward contract, you can fix the exchange rate depending on your provider. Mine is up to 18 months ahead. Most are sort of 12 months ahead, but I've got an 18-month spread on mine. And you can fix the exchange rate whether you're buying currency or selling currency. You can fix the exchange rate up to 18 months ahead in return for a 10% deposit. So that you don't have to let go. It doesn't cripple your cash flow because you only have to pay a 10% deposit to secure it. But it's a really, really good idea, because what you don't want to do is agree a deal and you're importing goods, in your case, from China and Hong Kong, and you've agreed a price, and therefore you've worked out what your retail price is going to be and profitability.
Yep.
And then in the following 6 months, exchange rates go in the complete opposite way. And then all of a sudden, the actual bill to pay for the goods is going to be more expensive than the actual anticipated sales amount. And then there's a disaster. And it can easily happen. If anything, the problem is actually getting worse now, Phil, because, pre-2000, in rough rule of thumb measurements, Phil, pre-2000, if the markets moved 1% a week, it would be a big week in the markets.
Right.
In the last 24 hours, both pound euro and pound US dollar exchange rate has moved 1.5% in the last 24 hours. So that's how volatile the markets are at the moment, for the very reasons that you explained. You've got Brexit, you've got interest rates going up in the UK and the USA, two of the major financial centers in the world. You've got the war in Ukraine. So there's so many factors hitting the market all at the same time that is causing massive volatility. And it's been the case for a while because, it's been the case since the Brexit vote in 2016. It was the case since Trump's election in 2016. You go back another few years, you had the Eurozone debt crisis in 2011. You had the Lehman Brothers crash in 2007. Lots and lots and lots of factors. So the markets are speeding up. They're not slowing down. They're actually getting more and more and more and more volatile, which is interesting. Makes for interesting times for those of us working the markets.
There's never a moment to sort of stand still, really, is there? And and just take a deep breath. But I'm just conscious of time, Tony, and for our listeners who do want that moment to take a deep breath and just say, what next? What would be the one thing that you'd really like to leave them with? Given all that we've just said and what's happening in the market?
Sure. I think, if I may, two points, one on interest rates, one on exchange rates. The interest rate one is, the Bank of England have raised interest rates for 3 consecutive months. So we've gone from 0.25 to half to 0.75. And for anybody who's entered the mortgage market in the last 10, 15 years, that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
But what they need to understand, those people, is that interest rates in the 460 odd year history of the Bank of England, interest rates have never been so low for so long as they have been in the last 10 years.
Right.
Okay. And I remember buying my first house in 1985, and I was delighted because interest rates had just fallen, and I got my first mortgage at 7.75%. And I was delighted.
Not the 15% that we were mentioning earlier.
Exactly right, or the 15%. Yeah, I was there. I was in the City of London when the UK crashed out of the exchange rate mechanism, and interest rates went up 3 times in one day. So that was frightening. I think it was 92 from memory. So I think, let's keep it in perspective. It's very easy. The news is always dominated. We all know that bad news sells newspapers. And they always, the cost of living, and I'm not belittling anything. I pay gas and electric bills too. I fill up the car at the pump. I can see where the prices are going. I get it. But let's keep it in perspective. By historical standards, 0.75% is still very, very low.
Yeah.
If I had to hazard a guess, I think by the end of the year, we might be at 1.25, but it won't be any more than that, which will still be quite historically by low, and things will settle down. It's excellent for savers who have had a miserable time over the last 10 years.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
So for anybody with some savings, deposit savings, cash savings, finally a little chink of light after 10 years of misery. In terms of the exchange rate, I think in the short term, we've had all our fun for March in terms of economic data. What's going to drive the markets between now and April is the Ukraine and what happens there. If there is a peace still, there'll be a tremendous relief rally in the markets. Stock markets will go mad again on the way up. So that'll be good for investors. And the pound should go back to the 6-year high registered on the 7th of March when it hit 122 for the first time since the Brexit vote against the euro.
Right.
If the other end of the scale, if the war gets prolonged, or God forbid, some Russian missile misses the Ukraine and hits Poland, a full NATO member, then we could see some serious action on the other side and the pound really go backwards. But I'm hopeful that things will improve. I think the pound will have quite a strong second half of the year. So anybody who's selling pounds and buying foreign currency because they're either trading abroad and importing from abroad, or paying salaries of overseas remote workers, which is something I never even heard of 3 years ago, but I do a lot of now in the last 2 years. Sending salary payments to overseas remote workers because of the rise in working from home. Or indeed people looking to buy holiday properties or put their child through a foreign university, study payments, or those kind of payments. I think for any pound sellers, you're in for a pretty decent, if not an outright good, second half of the year.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Tony. That's been excellent. And I just thought for a moment, I thought, wow, I've learned a lot just in this short time that we've been talking. And I hope for our listeners, there is a chink of light there of hope for the future. And let's hope that they, for the Ukrainian people, that there is some light at the end of the tunnel for them as well.
Absolutely.
In this dreadful situation. But thank you so much, Tony. It's been wonderful chatting with you and learning so much from you. Thank you so much for giving up your time, and really appreciate that. And anybody who really wants to know or assistance with regards to any foreign exchange, contact Cosmos Currency Exchange, Tony Redondo, and he will make sure that you get that personal service and and sort of wash away your troubles in some respects. So thank you so much, Tony. It's great having you with us. Okay.
Thank you very much, Phil, for having me on. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.